Alright, so I did my second presentation on sex-specific behavioral syndromes in the delicate skink. So the delicate skink's scientific name is Lampropholis delicata, and it is a repeatedly successful invasive species. While it was originally from Eastern Australia, it has since been accidentally introduced into New Zealand in 1960, where it now competes against many native lizards and mammals. While it was originally introduced into New Zealand in 1960 and became an invasive species, it has spread across New Zealand and shown great propensity as a successful invasive species in multiple areas in New Zealand. It's also since been introduced into Hawaii, where it's actually not considered an invasive species since it does not compete with the native animals. So I'm sure you remember teaching us this in class, of course. And I took this picture completely from one of your slides. So species who have successfully invaded novel environments are predisposed to certain traits. This can be seen in exploratory individuals who are typically more prone to enter transportation. Bolder and more aggressive individuals are typically more able to occupy novel resources. And individuals or animals with low levels of parental care are better able to establish a viable population and spread their population into new invasion fronts. So as you can see on this picture, typically these behaviors are associated with one another, and these behaviors are associated with one another. So the article that I specifically was looking at looked at the sex-specific behaviors, and they wanted to determine whether the different sexes had a different propensity for different behaviors. So a quote that I took directly from the article was, "Sex differences in behavior could provide a mechanism that explains the delicate skink's successful invasion history via accidental introductions." And so a lot of what the authors talked about was how studies have looked at variation between sexes in a singular trait, and an example that they gave was the male house sparrow versus the female house sparrow, and they invest differential levels of parental care. But the authors noted that few studies have looked at variation between sexes in multiple traits. And thanks to this, the idea that behavioral syndromes may vary between sexes within a species hasn't really been researched as much. So this is an actual table that I took from the article, and I circled some of the important pieces. So the first important part was that female delicate skinks were significantly more sociable than males, and this can be seen here. And with a p-value of 0.01, this was pretty significant. And one of the explanations that they gave for this was that females often tend to be more sociable in lizard species and other species because it gives them anti-predator group benefits. It allows for enhanced foraging efficiency, and it also can increase their reproductive success and the survival of their offspring. So it tends to be more beneficial for females to be sociable than males who are typically competing with one another. So it's better for the males to be separated from each other. In addition, while this was not significant, female delicate skinks showed a trend toward being more exploratory, and this can be seen here. The p-value is 0.09, So it wasn't too far off from being significant. So the authors highlighted that important point as well. And also, they noted that both sexes showed positive correlations between activity, exploratory, and social behaviors. So a little bit about the importance of these results. The combination of the higher exploration and the higher sociability in females could potentially give an insight into the success of the delicate skink as an invasive species. Often in other studies, what has been found is that exploratory behavior in lizards promotes information gathering, faster habituation to new environments, and novel predators, and this allows them to be a more successful invasive species. And in the delicate skink, with the combination of higher exploration and sociability, females who could possibly be leading the invasion front would be the reason, possibly, for their continued success as an invasive species. And this is also partly due to them being the regenerative sex. In addition, another important result of this study was that the activity exploratory social behavioral syndrome was seen in both sexes of the delicate skink. And this behavioral syndrome has also been associated with dispersal tendencies. And a dispersal-related syndrome such as this could also help to explain the success of the delicate skink as an invasive species. And this is partially due to the idea that social individuals disperse when the population densities are low. And this would be because they would be seeking out other individuals. And in opposition to this, asocial individuals would tend to disperse whenever population densities are higher. So in conclusion, the authors didn't specifically find a difference in behavior between the sexes of the delicate skink, but this doesn't mean that other species would not have different behavioral syndromes based on gender. And so what the authors found, even just with sociability, really makes a strong case for why behavioral syndrome should be focused on studying sex-specific traits between the genders. This could also really help to provide important insight into the propensity of a species to become invasive, and it could also offer explanations as to why invasive species currently are successful. And this has not been the only study that has looked at sex-specific behavioral syndromes, but it was the one that I was looking at, and I was most interested in because I really like lizards. But just as another example, other studies have found that behavioral syndromes in the wild blue tit could also be sex-specific. So here's my works cited, and that is my presentation.